Chapter 1. Grace in the Wreckage. At 18, Daisy Mae Harper lost her mother, her home, and the last illusion that anyone was coming to save her. What she found next was a turquoise van, a dangerous kind of freedom, and a road that would change everything. November 1968, Lower Manhattan, New York. Snow drifted down over Greenwich Village. Daisy Mae Harper sat in the front pew of a funeral home that smelled like incense and death. Orchids surrounded the casket, white, purple, and bright pink. They were in every corner, as if somehow the tropics had exploded in Manhattan. They were her mother's favorite. Her mother had grown up in South Florida, where orchids grew wild, clinging to trees like they refused to die. She had survived one of the first open-heart surgeries in 1962 for something the doctors pronounced carefully, tetralogy of Fallot, like it was something French and not a ticking time bomb in her chest. She'd barely made it through that surgery. Open-heart surgery in the early 1960s was still new and very risky, with no guarantee it would work. Heart-lung machines were crude. Survival was not guaranteed. Evelyn had survived 6 more years afterward. But not long enough. Daisy stared at the casket and thought, I can't believe she's gone. She was barely 18, and her father, Thomas "Tommy" Harper, was nowhere around. Tommy had been disappearing for years, into bars down on Bleecker Street, into back rooms filled with thick cigarette smoke, bottles of rye, and whatever pills were fashionable that month. But this was the longest he'd ever been gone. He vanished the day after Evelyn died. To Daisy, it felt almost like a second kind of loss. 3 days later, someone knocked on the apartment door. The apartment still carried the scent of stale cigarettes, mothballs, and the eucalyptus oil her mother rubbed on her chest when she couldn't breathe. Daisy opened the door to find Mr. Wilson, the landlord. He handed her a folded notice without looking her in the eye. 6 months behind, he mumbled. You have 30 days to get out. 30 days? Daisy closed the door and leaned her forehead against it. Columbia University was still expecting Daisy's tuition. Student housing had stopped being paid once her mother died. Her father hadn't just abandoned her emotionally, he'd abandoned her financially too. She walked back into the apartment. Her parents were hoarders, not the trash kind you see on Hoarders, the sentimental kind. Her mother kept everything that meant something, and everything meant something to her. Birthday cards from 1954, ticket stubs, a chipped photo frame from Miami, even a grocery receipt from the day Daisy was born. Because her heart, damaged as it was, had been enormous. Daisy began boxing it all up. Grief felt like suffocation. Another knock. Who on earth could that be now? She muttered under her breath. This time it was a delivery boy, holding an envelope stamped, Confidential, Daisy Mae Harper. Inside was a check for $500 from the family attorney. Apparently her grandfather hadn't been the broke Florida fisherman Daisy had heard about. He had passed away the year prior. He'd left something small behind when he passed away. Not life-changing, but enough. $500 in 1968 was survival. 2 days later, she saw it. It was parked near Washington Square Park, a new turquoise Volkswagen camper van with a drifter standing beside it. He had sunburned cheeks and wire-rim glasses, and he was trying to sell it. He said he was heading west. California was calling his name, and he needed the money. The van had wood paneling, a tiny sink, a stove that didn't always work, a miniature refrigerator, a fold-out bed, and swivel front seats. To Daisy, it was freedom on 4 wheels. She handed him the money. I'll call her Wanderlust, she said, running her hand along the steering wheel. The drifter grinned. I hope she treats you right. Daisy hoped he was right too. Soon, Daisy was living in Wanderlust, on the edge of the Columbia campus. Columbia University was in an uproar that year. Just months earlier, in April 1968, students had occupied buildings to protest the Vietnam War and the university's ties to defense research. Police had stormed the campus, and more than 700 students were arrested. The world was falling apart. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated earlier that April, Robert F. Kennedy in June, and the Democratic National Convention in Chicago had turned into televised chaos that summer. America was losing its mind. Daisy fit right in. She decorated Wanderlust with pink lace curtains she'd found at a thrift shop. She burned incense and bought fluffy blankets. She imagined a retro pink interior, a plush sanctuary that felt soft, seductive, and completely unconventional. She wore a small section of her strawberry blonde hair in the braid she always did. Green eyes, long, sexy legs, and just a little wild. And that's when she met him. Jesse Walker. Tall, dark hair, a gentle smile. He rode a motorcycle. He didn't drink much, which immediately made him different from her father. They studied together, marched together, kissed under the stars. She fell hard and fast, the kind of fall that leaves your heart behind you. Then she began listening to the radio every day, hoping Jesse's date of birth wouldn't be pulled in the lottery. "Oh no," Daisy whispered when she heard it. They announced the dates of birth of the men most likely to be drafted. Then they waited for the letter, and it came. Jesse tried to act brave. Daisy tried to act stronger. The war was draining the country of its sons, one lottery number at a time. By 1968, more than 500,000 U.S. troops were in Vietnam. What Daisy didn't realize was that her own body was quietly rewriting her future. She found out alone in the bathroom of a clinic that smelled like bleach and judgment. She didn't tell Jesse. She didn't tell anyone except Autumn. Autumn Chestnut was a nursing student. Tall, beautiful, blonde, sharp-tongued. She'd been Daisy's shadow since freshman year. They were double trouble, two heartbeats skipping to the same chaotic rhythm. They'd steal or borrow Dexedrine, Seconal, Percodan, even Quaaludes from the medical supplies office in Autumn's nursing class at the university. Then they'd sell them at concerts and protests. It wasn't exactly ethical, but neither, in their minds, was the war. The pills were popular. They had the ability to tilt your whole world. Daisy kept her mother's silver locket in a tin box beneath the bed in the van. Engraved on the back were the words, "Keep going. Grace will never leave your side." Inside was a black and white photograph of Daisy as a baby in her mother's arms. Grace was her mother's maiden name, and now it was a word that had become Daisy's anchor.